Julia, a 29-year-old single mother, exhausted from years of struggle and sleepless nights caring for her 3-year-old asthmatic son Noah, board the plane by mistake. She intended to join her mother in Maine, a trip funded by months of savings, but in the airport crowd, she picks up the wrong boarding pass in the name of Julie Ann Dawson. At boarding, the distracted staff lets her through without checking. Sitting on the plane, her son asleep against her, Julia is shaken when a flight attendant discreetly informs her that she is not on the correct passenger list. "You're not supposed to be here," the attendant whispers, explaining that the plane has already left the gate and she will have to stay on board until landing. Julia's cheeks flush under the curious gazes of the other passengers. She holds Noah tighter, her heart racing, humiliated yet determined to remain calm. She hasn't noticed the man next to her, silent, dressed in a charcoal suit, who hasn't reacted to the scene. His silence is not cold, but respectful, as if he understands her embarrassment. Julia looks down, trying to blend into her seat, stroking Noah's hair for reassurance. A few hours earlier, in the crowded airport, she was exhausted, her coat too big, her hair in a messy ponytail, marked by the fatigue of motherhood and grief. Her husband died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving Julia alone with Noah, whose asthma is worsening. This trip was a lifeline, a return to her mother for a respite. But due to a mistake, she finds herself on a plane heading to an unknown destination, unable to rectify the situation. The murmurs of the passengers fade, the hum of the engines fills the cabin. Julia tries to calm her anxiety, wondering what awaits her upon landing. The man next to her remains still, his hands calmly resting on his knees, his presence strangely soothing despite his silence. As the plane ascends into the sky, Julia, still shaken by the boarding incident, adjusts Noah, who is asleep against her. The flight attendant returns, confirming that the error lies with the airline and that assistance will be provided upon landing to redirect her. Julia nods, her cheeks still flushed with embarrassment, trying to focus on her son. She then notices the man next to her, who has yet to utter a word. In his 30s, perhaps a bit older, with dark hair and a composed expression, he exudes an aura of restraint. When he leans to remove his coat and gently place it under Noah's head, his gesture is so discreet that it almost goes unnoticed. Julia murmurs a shy "thank you," which he acknowledges with a simple nod, avoiding eye contact. This silence, far from being distant, seems imbued with respect, as if he understands the space she needs. Outside, day fades into twilight, and the hum of the engines envelopes the cabin in fragile tranquility. Julia feels the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, the presence of this stranger offering her unexpected comfort. As the plane gains altitude, he finally breaks the silence. "Tough day?" His voice is soft, almost hesitant. Julia, taken aback, replies, "More like a tough year." She confides that she was supposed to join her mother in Maine to help Noah, whose severe asthma has worsened. She explains that she works as a waitress, juggling double shifts to pay for her son's medication, and that her husband passed away in an accident 2 years ago. Her voice trembles, but she continues, describing the overwhelming fatigue, the nights in the emergency room, and the feeling that the world is crushing her. The man listens without interrupting, without offering platitudes, his gaze shadowed by an emotion she does not yet understand. The airplane cabin, immersed in calm, vibrates gently under the hum of the engines. Julia, holding sleeping Noah, listens to Christopher, who has just shared the loss of his daughter, Lily. She feels a deep connection, a mutual understanding born from their respective wounds. Christopher, eyes fixed on the window, seems more relaxed, as if sharing his story has lightened him. Julia, touched by his vulnerability, shares in turn. I thought I was broken, but tonight, I think I'm not. These words, whispered, resonate like a revelation. Christopher nods, a sad smile on his lips, and a single tear slides down his cheek. He does not wipe it away, hiding nothing, revealing a pain he hasn't expressed in 5 years. Julia, without trying to fill the silence, keeps her hand on his, offering a stable and warm presence. This gesture, simple yet powerful, weaves a bond between them, a refuge in this suspended night. The plane lands with a slight jolt, the wheels squeaking against the tarmac. The cabin comes alive. Passengers rise, grab their bags, check their phones. Julia, motionless, adjusts Noah, who is barely waking, blinking his eyes. The flight attendant returns, assuring her that an agent will be waiting at the exit to guide her back to Maine. Julia nods, but the thought of leaving this plane, this moment, feels harsh. She glances at Christopher, still seated, a slight tension on his forehead. The plane is almost empty, the last passengers having disappeared into the bustling terminal. Christopher, still seated, stares at Julia's seat, where the imprint of his son Noah seems to still be warm. A strange sensation washes over him, a mix of ache and clarity, as if this chance meeting had awakened a part of him that had been dormant since the death of his daughter, Lily. He is not a man to give in to impulsive emotions. His life is made of logic, schedules, contracts. Yet, Julia's honesty, her unvarnished fatigue, her quiet strength in the face of adversity have left a mark on him. He wonders if he should have asked for her number, her full name, anything to keep a connection. But the moment has passed, and Julia is gone, taking Noah and their shared story with her. As he disembarks from the plane, the noise of the terminal, announcements, flashing screens, a hurried crowd, brings him back to reality, but everything feels distant. He thinks of Julia, probably being escorted to correct her flight mistake, and feels a loss he cannot explain. This woman, whom he knows only by a first name and a few hours of confidences, has left an indelible mark. Back in his routine, Christopher cannot help but think of her. Days pass, but the sound of her voice, her tired smile, the way she held Noah with fierce devotion, linger like a haunting melody. He remembers her "thank you," spoken not out of politeness, but with a sincerity that mattered. He could ask the airline to check the manifest, but that feels too intrusive, almost unworthy of the purity of their exchange. Instead, an impulse drives him to write. Sitting at his desk one morning, he drafts an email to the internal communications team of his company, the Phoenix Foundation. A few days after Christopher's email was sent, a young writer from the Phoenix Foundation's marketing team, Ellie, reads his message and is deeply moved. She proposes to turn it into an anonymous story for the company's blog, titled "Some Flights Are Not Mistakes, We Just Don't Understand the Destination Yet." Christopher, after a brief hesitation, agrees, provided that anonymity is preserved. The post is published and spreads like wildfire on social media. Internet users share the story with heartfelt comments. "It gave me chills, proof that humanity still exists." Similar accounts flood in, recounting chance encounters that changed lives. Christopher reads each comment, touched by the impact of his story, but still haunted by the image of Julia and Noah. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Julia, a waitress at a diner working weekends, receives a message from a former colleague. "This sounds like you have to read this," the text says, accompanied by a link to the post. Curious, Julia clicks and begins to read. Her breath catches. Without mentioning her name, the story describes her flight, her son, her exhaustion, their conversation. Tears well up in her eyes as she sits on a bench near the diner's kitchen, her phone trembling in her hands. Noah, coloring beside her, hums softly. "Mom, why are you crying?" he asks. Julia, smiling through her tears, replies, "I'm fine, sweetheart." Intrigued, he adds, "Is it the man in the coat?" She laughs softly, touched by her son's intuition, and whispers, "Yes, it's the man in the coat." She reads the editor's note, inviting anyone who recognizes themselves in the story to contact the author. Julia hesitates, her heart racing. Then, with trembling hands, she opens her messaging app and writes a short message. A few days after sending his email, Christopher is in his office, gazing at the skyline, when he is informed that a certain Julia wishes to see him. His heart stops for a moment. He asks for her to be brought up, his voice calmer than he feels. When Julia enters, dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, her hair tied back, her eyes full of uncertainty, time seems to stand still. They look at each other, wordlessly, then she smiles shyly. "Is it really you who wrote that?" He nods. "Yes, really." Julia scans the office of the Phoenix Foundation, noticing the warm wood, the photos of smiling children, the inspiring quotes. "It's beautiful," she says. Christopher suggests lunch, and they head to a quiet restaurant with earthy tones and large windows. The silence between them is not awkward, but charged with anticipation. He asks her questions about Noah, about her life, about her dreams beyond survival. Julia hesitates, then confides that she wanted to become a counselor to help young mothers like herself, but that dream faded in the face of bills and medications. "Dreams don't matter when you have to pay the rent," she says. Christopher, listening attentively, replies softly, "They matter more than anything." Then, almost on a whim, he adds, "I'd like to offer you a position at the Phoenix Foundation." Julia, stunned, drops her fork. He explains that his foundation, created after Lily's death, supports single-parent families with grants, mentoring, and healthcare, but lacks an authentic voice, someone who truly understands these struggles. "You've lived it," he says. "You know what the manuals omit." Lunch stretches on, and they then walk in a nearby park, the leaves rustling under their feet. Julia begins her first day at the Phoenix Foundation, nervous yet determined, dressed in a second-hand blazer still infused with a hint of lavender. Used to working in a diner, with sticky tables and the struggle to make ends meet, she steps into a new world, an office where her story, not just her work, is valued. Christopher introduces her to the team as someone who embodies our mission more than anyone else. His tone, devoid of condescension, is filled with respect. As a community support coordinator, Julia listens to single mothers, teenagers with babies, women who survive in silence. She shares her experiences, offering understanding and encouragement, gaining confidence each day. She helps shape support programs, improves onboarding processes, and participates in scholarship interviews. Her ideas, raw yet valuable, are heard by the team and even the board. At home, life is changing too. Noah, enrolled in a specialized preschool for children with respiratory needs, is thriving. His asthma attacks are decreasing, and his laughter is becoming more frequent. Julia no longer has to choose between groceries and inhalers. Christopher often stops by, sometimes for no specific reason. A book for Noah, a leftover soup he claims is from a team lunch. Noah first calls him Mr. Logan, then Uncle Logan, and finally Mom's friend. Julia doesn't correct him. Their relationship evolves without grand declarations, but in small gestures, Christopher staying late to help her, his texts asking how her day went, his attentive listening. Julia, for her part, begins to laugh more freely, her fatigue lifting like spring after a long winter. She notices how he opens doors without thinking, how she instinctively tidies her desk. Their love grows gently, without storms, but like a dawn, warming everything it touches. The love between Julia and Christopher grows in the interstices of their daily lives, without fanfare or solemn promises, but with a gentle constancy. Evenings on Julia's worn-out couch, a cup of tea in hand, become precious moments where they talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes, when Julia is exhausted, a fatigue that only single mothers understand, Christopher drapes a blanket over her shoulders and stays close, silent, until she falls asleep. Noah, now attached to Mom's friend, offers him drawings and insists that Christopher attend this special person's day at school. "Why me?" Christopher asks, kneeling to tie Noah's shoe. "Because you always come back," the child replies simply. Julia, hearing this, retreats to the kitchen to hide her tears. This quiet loyalty from Christopher, who seeks neither to fix her past nor to erase his own, changes everything. He stands by her side in the chaos, in the silences, in the healing. Julia, who believed she was too damaged to be loved, begins to open up, not to a new identity, but to a version of herself capable of loving again. At work, Julia thrives at the Phoenix Foundation, listening to women whose stories resonate with hers, offering advice drawn from her experiences. She improves programs, making help more accessible, and her impact is tangible. Mothers regain hope, teenagers envision a future. Christopher, watching her interact, admires her ability to transform her pain into strength for others. Their bond deepens in these shared moments, in Noah's laughter, in the exchanged glances during meetings. One day, at the inauguration of the Phoenix Center for Single Parents, Julia, in a light blue dress, observes the crowd, children with balloons, volunteers, women moved by this space created for them. Christopher steps onto a small stage, thanking donors and guests. He speaks of resilience, of stories that matter, of a place where no one walks alone. Julia, near the entrance, Noah holding her hand, smiles with pride. She does not yet know that Christopher is about to change their lives. In front of an emotional crowd at the Phoenix Center, Christopher, on his knees, opens a velvet box revealing a simple gold ring, adorned with a stone sparkling like a promise. "It belonged to my mother," he says, his voice trembling with emotion. "She told me to give it to the one who would remind me that my heart still beats." He looks at Julia. "I didn't think I could love again, but you, Julia, are everything I didn't know I was searching for. Will you marry me?" Tears stream down Julia's cheeks as she laughs, a sound mingled with joy and disbelief. She nods, unable to speak, and embraces him. "I thought no one could love someone like me," she whispers in his ear. "But I forgot. Love finds those who dare to hope again." The room erupts in applause, Noah clapping louder than anyone, his smile radiant. They embrace in the midst of the crowd, in their own world. A few weeks later, Julia, Christopher, and Noah board a plane for their first family vacation. Noah, by the window, marvels at the clouds, while Julia, in the middle, holds Christopher's hand. Their intertwined fingers rest between them, a tangible link to their new life. As the plane takes off, Julia gazes out the window, her eyes shining. "This time, it's the right flight," she says with a smile. Christopher nods, his gaze soft. Julia's story, which began with a mistaken boarding alongside her son and her grief, concludes with a profound truth. Sometimes, the wrong flight takes you exactly where you were meant to be. Love, discreet and patient, slipped into their lives, not as a storm, but as a gentle light, taking the form of a second chance. Julia, once overwhelmed by exhaustion and mourning, found in Christopher someone who sees her worth, not her wounds. Their bond, forged in a moment of shared vulnerability, grew into a family, a future, a home. The plane continues its flight, the cabin bathed in soft light. Julia, holding a sleeping Noah, feels her heart calm, soothed by the silent presence of the man beside her. Then he speaks, his low voice as if handling a fragile memory. I had a daughter. His name is Christopher, and he recounts that his daughter, Lily, died 5 years ago, just before her 4th birthday, taken by a swift leukemia. Julia, shaken, feels her stomach knot at the thought of Noah, who has just turned 3. Christopher describes Lily, her wild laughter, the gap between her teeth, her overflowing joy. He recalls the months spent in hospitals, the waiting rooms whose every detail he knows. Julia remains silent, not wanting to break the delicate thread he is unraveling. He confides that after Lily's death, his marriage fell apart. We thought we would face this together, but we just survived side by side, he says, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Some nights, he wanted to talk about Lily, while his wife couldn't bear to hear her name. Other evenings, it was the opposite. They separated 2 years later, without screams, just signatures and an immense void. Julia feels a deep pain for this man, not only for the loss of his daughter, but for the life that shattered afterward. He adds that he took refuge in work, travel, hotels, fleeing the emptiness of his home. I tell myself I'm busy, but in truth I'm hiding, he admits. Julia, moved, gently places her hand on his. I'm so sorry, she whispers.